Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to share with you the top 10 boss creatures in 2024, as there's so many exciting options out there. So let's get straight into it. In at number 10 we have got the Megalosaurus, and this creature is here just because it really does do a good job for defeating Rockwell and Arboration, and it is just generally quite a nice boss creature overall as well. You can definitely do some things with it and it works really nicely, at least in all the cases that I've used it in. It's very reliable and it deals quite a hefty amount of damage, which definitely does play to its advantage. It has a very nice amount of health and its mobility is great as well, and although I'm pretty sure they don't have any kind of pack buff, they do deal some kind of bleed ability, but probably not to bosses, only really to small creatures, as is evident there. But it's not really a bleed ability, it's some different kind of sustained damage, so maybe scratch that point. But they can deal some sustained damage to smaller creatures. Obviously nothing too special you could say from these creatures in a regard to special abilities, but they are very well rounded, nice, and just generally good creatures to use for doing any kind of boss fight. Next up we have got the Uteranus, and would it really be a bosses list of 2024, of course, without the UT being involved? This is just seemingly, to me at least, a very crucial creature to do any kind of boss fights with. It's just so nicely laid out, and its abilities work in such a way that in the boss arena you could be taking less damage and dealing even more. And obviously that ability is the Courage Roar, and it gives you a nice job to do as just a player, especially if you're going solo in a boss fight, apart from simply just clicking a button and attacking things. It adds a new, also just general dimension of fun to the game, which I wouldn't really expect to be saying for boss fights in Ark, as they tend to be just quite spam click. But there's a lot more that you can kind of do with this creature, and you feel like you're doing a lot more than just sitting somewhere and clicking. And obviously they do give you quite a hefty advantage in the boss arena, so it's definitely a no-brainer to get one, and they're just so good. You can't really live without a UT, and yes, the Daedon's there as well for you, but you know, they're not always really necessary, whereas I find the UT is, especially for those more classical bosses. Next up we have got the Megatherium, and thinking back on it, I might have put the UT in our higher point, but these do kind of do a bit more than what a UT would do in the boss fight, so I guess they do deserve a higher place on this list, of course. And when looking at a creature like this, they are very good at defeating the Broodmother, and that's found on many maps, not just the island, and obviously included with some other bosses which you'll find. But still, that insect buff that you'll get, insect rage, something along those lines, that you get from killing insects, of course, is just truly an amazing ability, which you can't deny is one of huge usefulness just for defeating any bug boss. And it really does just help out, and these creatures like this are just really good for things like that, and it has to be put in here for it. It cannot be demoted for this ability, as it is a very useful one, and I really do enjoy using these things, not even just for insect bosses. They do quite hefty amounts of damage as well, and their health is pretty reasonable, so I would still use these things in some rare occasions for those non-insect bosses if it was really all I had. So they are actually in some ways quite versatile boss creatures. Next up we have got the Theory, and no, this isn't just on the list because its saddle was unlocked at level 69.
Nice.
This creature is here just because it's so nice in the boss arena. Just generally across all things, Theories deal a lot of damage, and although they're a bit of a pain to heal up, requiring Sweet Vegetable Cake to really get the job fully done, a Daedon can do a lot of the work for you in quite a lot of cases, unless that boss is really doing tons and tons of damage. And also with a boss like the Dragon, it has a special advantage because it's a herbivore, not a carnivore, so that flame ability isn't not going to deal too much damage to these creatures. And on top of that, they are very mobile as well, and just versatile outside of bosses, so it is a no-brainer for them being just a great boss creature. But it's also, it gives you more incentive to sustain them as well, because they're great all-rounders just across arc in general, so you know that is going to be extremely useful to you and for you, and they are just really great in the boss arena as well for all those reasons that I stated. Just really nice, useful creatures capable of so much in the boss arena, and also their saddle was unlocked at the absolute perfect level. Next up, we have got the Carcharodontosaurus, and this is just that essential boss creature for doing any of the extinction bosses, and it really is such a hard hitting damage dealer for those things that it does definitely have to be included on this list. The Giga, technically you could put in this spot as well, but I find it's a lot less reliable than the Carcharodontosaurus due to that rage meter. It kind of enacts as that having even less health than it actually does. It's like a fake health stat in a way, because it doesn't actually have that much health, as it's not going to fight for you for all of that health, of course. And although it doesn't really matter too much for the Alpha King Titan, as creatures like that will die quite quickly anyway, so it's not the biggest issue out there, it does matter more for those other Titans where, you know, you'll probably be facing that at points, whereas with the Carcharodontosaurus, you simply won't. And yes, they are a little bit more of a stretch to tame. They really aren't the most difficult in the world, and they are just so much more reliable than things like Gigas, and once their blood rages up to the fullest that it can be, they do even more damage than the Giga. So in my opinion, it's an absolute no-brainer to have one of these creatures in your roster for doing any kind of bosses. Next up, we have got the Rex, and for just that most classic boss creature, it really did have to be on the list. This creature is just so capable for any kind of boss, really, unless you're fighting the mode, then you want something like a Modes or a Meg. None of those creatures are on the list, by the way, but you can use a creature which is later on the list for the Moda boss, which actually is quite preferable for me, but still, those would be really useful. Obviously, the Rex wouldn't be useful there, but for everything else, also apart from the extinction bosses, now that I think about it, this creature is extremely great, and it's just an amazing all-rounder, and it really does deserve to be on the list, especially at this level, as you know, the Rex is so widely used around, and you know, because of that, it needs to be on the list. But it's very well rounded as a creature. Great health, great damage, maybe not the best mobility, but you don't really need that in the boss fight. It is a hard, heavy damage dealing creature, a bit of a weird sentence, with a healthy amount of health, which obviously aids it in any boss fight scenario. And you know, that's why it's just such a popular boss creature still to this day, especially with X-Rectors on Gen 1. You have yourself even more variety, and with their ease of taming on ASA, it really is a no-brainer to get yourself one for doing any kind of bosses. Next up, we have got the Spinosaurus, and I just really like this creature for doing any kind of classical bosses, and also for the Moda as well. Works really effectively, works pretty nicely for the Master Controller boss, although I would use things like Rexes because of their higher health stat, which the Spino doesn't have, because that boss is quite lengthy and it really will drain a lot of health out of your creatures. So you want a creature with a lot of health, which obviously the Rex does offer, and if you had some highly mutated Spinos, then you could definitely get by, and you could even get by with just some non-mutated Spinos in cases on Gamma. But if you're doing it on Alpha, you'll definitely need that extra health. It is pretty much just necessary, really. It just needs to be there. But for other things, this really does just excel. It's got more mobility, and it deals more damage than something like the Rex, and obviously it does attack faster as well, and it is again very mobile in the water, making it a great option for the Moda boss. But you can obviously use Moses, and you can use Megalodons as well, and whatever your preferred underwater combat creature is. But I find Spinos work quite nicely. If you haven't tried it out before, I would definitely recommend that you do at some point. So they're just really versatile creatures, and that is why they need to be on this list for me. They're just very versatile, great for classical bosses, great for any underwater boss that you might face as well. Obviously not going to be great for those extinction bosses and those really lengthy ones, as it doesn't really have the health in most cases to stay alive most of the fight. A mutated one will be able to do it. In at number 3, we have got the Allosaurus, and this creature's here just because it is so nice to use for bosses. It is a very fast, speedy, agile creature, which is particularly easy to tame on ASA, considering that you can just take them from a baby, you can just kill the parents and then boom, simple as that. But they're not really a stretch to tame on ASE either, and they are a go-to boss creature, especially if you struggle to get your hands on things like Rexters, although that's not too common in case, considering how easy they are to just tame anyway, even without a trap, actually, considering they're not particularly fast. You probably will want a trap for things like aloes, as they are particularly fast, but you can easily track down which one is the highest level in a given pack without even, using anything like a spyglass, because they got the alpha pack buff. But you'll probably want to tame all 3 in one go, and you've got yourself 3 aloes like that, and it is very easy to tame them in bulk, which obviously does aid them for bosses. They're easier to get to fight in bosses, and they deal a bleed ability, which obviously does just hugely aid them. They don't deal bleed ability to bosses, but they can deal bleed ability to just general other creatures as well, and they also do have the pack buff too, so they're going to be boosted in that way. And if you boost it on top of that with a UT as well, you're going to be dealing out some serious damage, and obviously that's why they are just so great for all of it. They are just heavy damage dealers, and although maybe they don't have the highest amount of health compared to some other creatures on this list, they do have a very reasonable amount of health, and obviously their mobility and damage makes them very effective boss creatures, and you should definitely try them at some point if you haven't already. In at number 2, we've got the Shadowmane, and this creature's here just because it is so widely usable across all classical traditional bosses, and it deals tons of damage in a pack, insane, and they have mobility like you've probably never really even seen before, unless you've obviously seen Shadowmanes before, which is probably most of you out there, but it's just more of an expression, a term of phrase, if you will. And these creatures are just so widely used across all of Ark that they really do have to be on this list for me, especially in boss fights. The go-to for doing Rockwell on Gen 2, and for all the classical bosses that find across the islands, Ragnarok, Fjorda, Valguero, all of those things, they really do pack a huge punch. They can even do the bosses on Fjorda at a bit of a push, especially if you get some higher level ones, and they can be used for the Moda as well, considering that they are some pretty decent underwater creatures. And if you are thinking, by the way, why aren't the Titans and other creatures like this on the list? Yes, they are very good boss creatures, but only for one specific boss, and I'm not really going to include them as they aren't full permanent tames. And in number 1, we have got the Deinonychus, and this creature is here just because it is my all-time favourite boss creature, and it probably will be my all-time favourite boss creature just throughout all of Ark and all of my life, really. I can't see any other creature replacing this. It is so mobile, and it deals hefty amounts of bleed damage, and bleed damage to bosses too, as it can latch onto them, and it's just so crippling to their health. You can mash through bosses with absolute ease with no issues whatsoever. And obviously they do have the pack buff as well. If you get a pack of them, you can really deal some serious damage over very short periods of time with these things, and that's what they are really useful. You don't really use them over longer bosses, as their health can be a little bit lackluster for some bosses that maybe last half an hour, 20 minutes in some cases. But if you get some really good health mutations on them, then you can definitely last that easily, especially considering how much damage they do. But when it's more minigame based, then it takes a little bit more effort to use these creatures in a fight, and maybe something like a Rex or with something with more health will be more advisable. But for everything else, these creatures are insanely useful. They are incredibly fast, mobile, just great all-rounders outside of bosses as well. Inside of bosses, they deal bleed damage, and they have the pack buff, and if you pair that on top of with UT buffs, you can really have yourself an insane army of creatures at your disposal, which are the boss killing champions of the game, so that's why they're so advisable. The top 10 raiders according to AI, so without further ado, let's get straight into it. In at number 10, we have got the Managama, and the reason why this creature is here is because it has excellent mobility with the ability to jump and glide, making it easy to traverse different types of terrain quickly. This agility is crucial for raiding, as it allows players to quickly approach approach and escape from targets. One of the Managama's most potent abilities is its freeze breath attack. This attack can freeze enemy creatures and players in place, making them vulnerable to follow-up attacks. It is particularly useful for disabling defenders or neutralizing turrets and defenses before a raid. The Managama is a versatile creature that can be effective in various situations. Its ability to hover and glide gives it an advantage when attacking bases with elevated structures or defending against aerial threats. The Managama also has the ability to regenerate stamina mid-air, allowing it to engage in prolonged combat or travel long distances without the need for frequent breaks. This stamina regeneration is beneficial during raids where sustained activity is required. The Managama also has a unique dodge ability that allows it to teleport short distances in any direction. This makes it highly evasive and difficult for enemies to hit, further enhancing its survivability during raids. It's essential to note that the game dynamics and creature abilities may be subject to changes throughout updates and patches. That's a nice thing to mention. I guess it is saying that because it's got its data from 2022, but you know, let's continue with the list, I guess. Next up, we have got the Wyvern, and this creature is here because they come with various elemental types, including fire, lightning, and poison. And there is also more, but it fails to mention those. Each type has a unique breath attack that deals substantial damage over a wide area. These attacks are highly effective against both structures and enemy creatures, making Wyverns formidable raiding mounts. Wyverns are flying creatures, if you couldn't tell that already, providing a significant advantage during raids. They can bypass many ground-based defences, reach elevated structures easily, and retreat quickly if needed. Their ability to fly allows players to survey a base from above, identifying weak points or potential entry points. Wyverns are generally fast and manoeuvrable. We don't just talk about their turning circle though, it's atrocious, allowing raiders to engage and disengage quickly. This speed is advantageous when trying to avoid enemy defences such as turrets or aggressive creatures. Wyverns also have a very high base damage output, especially when utilising their elemental breath attacks. This allows them to deal substantial damage to enemy structures and creatures, making them formidable raiding tools. The presence of a Wyvern during a raid can be intimidating to defending players. The fear of a powerful flying creature attacking can disrupt defences and create chaos among defenders. We're going to talk about what the Rhino Ganath has introduced, but obviously it doesn't really know too much of that creature's existence, so maybe it is valid that this creature's here. But as always, comment down below what you actually do think of what the AI has picked to put on this list, and obviously the script is by AI as well, if you couldn't tell that already. Next up, we have got the Spinosaurus, and this creature is here as they are very proficient swimmers, making them suitable for raids involving water-based structures or bases located near bodies of water. They can easily navigate through rivers and other aquatic areas, providing flexibility in raiding strategies. Spinos have relatively high base health pool, allowing them to withstand a significant amount of damage during raids. This makes them effective for soaking up turret fire and dealing with enemy defensives. Spinos have a strong bite attack, and their overall damage output is considerably large. This makes them very effective at dealing damage to structures and enemy creatures, aiding in the raiding process. Spinos are also very well-rounded creatures that can handle various situations. They can traverse both land and water, making them versatile in raiding scenarios, involving diverse terrain. Spinos are generally faster than some other large creatures, allowing for quicker movement during raids. Their speed can be advantageous when approaching a target, retreating, or maneuvering around defensive structures. Personally, I would agree with most of the stuff there. There is definitely some better creatures for doing tanking than a Spino. For example, carb enemies can do a bit. The Stego is also not on this list, by the way, if you are thinking that the Stego was going to be on the list. No, the AI did not pick out the Stego for being a great creature like that, but there is a somewhat tank which is on this list. There's kind of two of them, but there's one more notable one which obviously does come later in the list. But you know, I would say the Spino isn't a bad choice, it just maybe doesn't come to mind for me. Next up, we have got the Therizinosaurus, and this creature is here as the Theri has a very high base damage output with its claws, making it effective in dealing damage to both structures and enemy creatures. Its ability to gather resources efficiently extends to harvesting enemy structures during a raid. I don't think you can harvest enemy structures like that. You can't really just hack them to bits and get resources from it, but I guess we'll go with it. These are also versatile creatures that can be used for various tasks, including gathering resources, fighting and raiding. The versatility makes them suitable for adapting to different raiding scenarios and requirements. While not as tanky as some other creatures like the Rex or the Giga, the Theory has a decent health pool and can withstand a fair amount of damage. This, coupled with their damage output, allows them to be effective in raiding situations. The Theory's ability to gather large amounts of resources quickly can be advantageous during a raid. It can efficiently collect resources like thatch, wood and other materials which may be needed for crafting or building. Yet not really necessary for a raid, but you know, you might need that thatch. You might be a naked zombo out there and you need that thatch. I guess maybe that's excusable there. As a herbivore, the Theory can be a good choice for raiding, as for raiding herbivore only bases or areas where carnivores may struggle to find sustenance. That's not really relevant, but okay. Theory is also relatively easier to tame compared to some other more powerful creatures like the Giga. Their lower level aggression during taming makes them more accessible to a wider range of players. Yeah, I guess so, but I think on this creature, AI got a lot of things wrong. Next up, we have got the Parasaur, and this creature has a platform saddle, which you'll see later in the B-roll, allowing players to build structures on its back. This makes it an excellent mobile base for carrying raiding gear, turrets, or even smaller creatures into battle. The platform saddle provides a strategic advantage for raiders, allowing for a mobile protected raiding platform. The Parasaur has a relatively high base health pool, making it durable in raiding situations. Its ability to withstand damage allows it to soak up turret fire and protect riders or structures mounted on its platform. The Parasaur has a decent weight capacity, allowing it to carry significant amounts of resources, loot or raiding equipment. This can be advantageous for transporting materials during a raid. While not the fastest creature in the game, the Parasaur has moderate movement speed, enabling it to keep up with raiding parties or quickly approach target bases. Not really sure about that one, but okay. As a herbivore, the Parasaur does not require meat for sustenance. This can be beneficial in situations where obtaining meat may be challenging or where other players want to avoid the attention of carnivores. Not really relevant again, but you know, that's the Parasaur, I guess. Again, it kind of gets things a bit wrong with the herbivores. In at number 5, we have got the Golem, and this creature is here as they have an exceptionally high base health pool, making them excellent tanking creatures. And this is actually where I would definitely agree with the AI. Their ability to withstand a significant amount of damage allows them to soak up turret fire, I don't know what fire is, and endure attacks during raids. That's my mistake, by the way. That's not it spelling stuff wrong. It's got perfect English. The Golem's primary attack involves throwing large rocks at enemies and structures. This attack deals substantial damage over a distance, making it effective for damaging enemy structures and defences from a relatively safe position. Golems have natural armour made of rocks, which further enhances their durability. This natural armour reduces the damage they take from various sources, including firearms and melee attacks, making them even more formidable. The combination of high health, rock throw attack and natural armour makes Golems effective siege creatures. They can be used to breach enemy defence, destroy structures and disrupt defensive strategies. Golems also have a very decent weight, allowing them to carry large amounts of resources or loot required back during a raid. This can be helpful for transporting valuable items, and also they have resistance to explosive damage, making them less vulnerable to certain types of raiding tactics such as rocket attacks. This distance can be very advantageous. Largely, I'd say it's pretty decent on that one. Next up, we have got the Quetz, and this creature is here as they have a platform saddle, allowing players to build structures. Essentially, what it just said for the Golem repeated. Then also, being a flying creature, the Quetz will provide significant advantage during raids by allowing players to bypass ground-based defences and reach elevated structures. This makes it easier to survey a base, plan the attack, and avoid certain defences. The Quetzal has a very high weight capacity, allowing it to carry very heavy items, creatures, or large amounts of resources. Great for transporting after the raid is finished. The Quetzal also has very decent stamina, allowing for sustained flight and prolonged raiding activities without the need for frequent breaks. This stamina is essential for covering long distances during a raid and engaging in extended aerial combat. While not the fastest flyer in the game, the Quetzal has reasonable speed. This makes it effective for quickly approaching target bases, dodging enemy fire, and evading threats. Maybe not quite to the speed that I think it's trying to get at, but sure, I guess. Also, the platform saddle allows for the placement of turrets, providing a formidable defense capability during raids. This turns the Quetzal into a flying weapons platform that can be challenging for defenders to encounter. Few things wrong here with this one, but not too bad, I guess. In at number 3, we've got the Bronto. This creature is here because of the platform saddle again. Also, they have a considerably high base health pool, making them effective for tanking creatures. Their ability to absorb a substantial amount of damage attacks makes them vulnerable for soaking up turret fire. They also have a wide tail swipe attack that can deal damage to multiple structures and creatures at once. This makes them effective for clearing out smaller structures such as walls and just general defensive structures during a raid. Considering their massive size, they have a decent movement speed. Not too sure about that, but I've never found it's too awful, but sometimes it can be a little bit egregious. Also, it's relatively easier to feed compared to carnivores. I usually find it's easier to get my hands on meat than berries. That's just personal experience for me. And also the sheer size of the Bronto can be intimidating to defenders, potentially causing chaos and disruption among defending players. This psychological impact can work in the favour of raiders, creating opportunities for successful attacks. Maybe, but this isn't really 2016 Arc anymore, so I would probably say no to that last point. In at number 2, we have got the Giga, and they have an exceptionally high base damage output, making them one of the most powerful offensive creatures in the game. Their attacks can quickly shred through structures, defenses, and enemy creatures, making them highly effective for raiding. Gigas also possess a massive health pool, making them incredibly durable. This high health allows them to soak up a substantial amount of damage, including turret fire, during raids. This ability is crucial for ensuring the Giga's survival during these intense battles. Doesn't talk about the rage meter though, which is great, I guess. And, you know, considering that last point, it doesn't really make too much sense, but hey ho, I guess. Taking more health is going to be really great for the Giga, even though it does have that rage meter. But apparently, the sheer size of the Giga can be intimidating to defenders again. The psychological impact, guys. It's all about the psychological impact. We've all been getting it wrong. Just bring the biggest creature you possibly can, and everyone will just be so scared. You physically can't, like, the people will just not be able to fight you anymore. You're just too good. You just need to psychologically impact them. It's the strat, guys. And finally, it says, while primarily known for their defensive abilities, Gigas can also be used defensively during attacks. Their ability to deal with enemy creatures and structures makes them versatile assets for raiding parties. Okay, but you did forget about the rage meter. And number 1 is the Rex, and the reason why it said it is the best raiding creature out there is because they have a very high base damage output, making them effective at dealing damage to both structures and enemy creatures during raids. Their powerful bites can quickly break down walls and other defensive structures. Also, Rexes have a substantial health pool, allowing them to withstand a significant amount of damage. This makes them effective as tanking creatures, soaking up turret fire. I don't know why I said fire again. What is wrong with me? And serving as a durable front line during raids. Compared to some other powerful raiding creatures though, like the Giga, Wretches are considered more manageable to tame. This accessibility makes them a popular choice for players who want a powerful creature without the challenges of taming more difficult creatures. Wretches are also versatile creatures that can handle various tasks, including raiding, defending, battling other creatures. They're pretty much just all under raiding really for that. Their ability to move on both land and in water, they're awful swimmers by the way, makes them adaptable for different raiding scenarios. When used in a group pack, Rexes can benefit from the pack bonus. This is not true. The AI got it wrong last time and it still gets it wrong. And it says this increases their damage output, which they're particularly effective during raids, where multiple Rexes can be coordinated for a more potent attack. Yes, more Rexes are going to deal more damage, but they do not have the pack buff. So I think it's safe to say AI has got quite a lot wrong in this video, and there's loads of creatures it has missed out on. Like, where's the Stego? The Stego should be here. And obviously the Desmodus has actually been quite a good one, and the Pteranodon needs to be here, especially for those early raids. And obviously you can comment down below your thoughts on what other creatures you think that need to be on this list, as I think its choices haven't been the greatest today. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I'm pretty confident AI has not put me out of a job yet, but who knows, maybe it will learn even more. As always, comment down below what's your favourite raiding creature and put the top 10 list which you would have put here instead, and I'll see you all in the next one.